Imagine an apocalyptic scene. A fiery rain descends from the heavens, and in a flash, centuries of history turn to ash. These are not merely soulless stones and frescoes. They are priceless fragments of civilization, echoes of bygone eras that can never be repeated. In the crucible of the Second World War, as armies clashed and cities crumbled into smoking ruins, an invisible cultural front emerged. Amidst the fire and death, a silent battle was waged to preserve the soul of the past. The eternal city, Rome, watched in agony as flames, greed, and the ruthless negligence of those who saw monuments only as military targets consumed parts of its ancient and invaluable heritage. Today, we remember 5 treasures of ancient Rome that fell victim to the Second World War. Not to wallow in grief, but to honor their memory, for a people who lose touch with their past risk reliving its tragedy. War has always brought destruction, but in the 20th century, this destructive force acquired an unprecedented scale, becoming systematic, industrial, and indiscriminate. Millions of human lives were extinguished, and with them, thousands of temples, sculptures, books, cities, and memories vanished into oblivion. Italy, one of the bloodiest battlefields, found itself at the epicenter of this horror. Its priceless Roman heritage suffered merciless Allied bombing, looting by Nazi invaders, devastating fires, and mindless military decisions. Many of the treasures we will discuss had survived destructive earthquakes, barbarian invasions, and bloody civil wars. Yet, they proved helpless in the face of the 6 most brutal years of the last century. Sometimes, to destroy a civilization, you don't need a sword, merely a bomb or a match. The Campo Santo Monumentale in Pisa stands before us not merely as a cemetery, but as a true sanctuary where art, history, and spirituality intertwine. This sacred site, whose construction began in the distant year 1278, was built on soil reputedly brought from Golgotha itself, the mountain where Jesus Christ was crucified. Hence the name Campo Santo, which literally means field of the Holy Land. For centuries, the walls of this place were adorned with frescoes covering an area exceeding 2,600 square meters, making it comparable to the Sistine Chapel. Masterpieces such as The Last Judgment, The Triumph of Death, and scenes from the Old Testament transformed the space, turning it into a visual encyclopedia of medieval and Renaissance thought. However, nothing could protect the Campo Santo from the destructive force of war. In 1944, during an Allied bombing raid targeting Pisa's railway hub, one bomb struck the site directly. Fire raged for 3 days, consuming the roofs, ancient sarcophagi, and sculptures. The frescoes, painted in tempera on dry plaster, cracked, melted, and collapsed. The place where the people of Pisa found their final resting place was reduced to charred ruins. Thanks to the efforts of the American military and Italian restorers, some works were salvaged, but much was irrevocably lost. Today, a visit to the Campo Santo in Pisa offers a chance to see a restored building, yet one stripped of its original soul. It serves as a reminder that art does not always die of old age. Sometimes, it falls victim to hatred and the destructive force of war. The second priceless treasure, irrevocably lost in the flames of war, is the immense collection of ancient art that once belonged to Berlin State Museums. Before the tragic moment when devastating bombs rained down on the German capital, the city was the custodian of one of the world's most impressive collections of classical art. Within the renowned Altes Museum and Pergamon Museum, Roman statues, exquisite Greek sarcophagi, Etruscan jewelry, majestic religious friezes, and countless archaeological artifacts were proudly displayed. The undoubted jewel of this collection was the monumental Pergamon altar, transported from Turkey in the 19th century. Alongside it, hundreds of statues, elegant vases, precious ornaments, and intricate reliefs, originating from Rome and other ancient civilizations, were exhibited. For decades, this collection was tirelessly augmented through acquisitions, archaeological excavations, and, regrettably, even looting. However, with the outbreak of the Second World War, the course of history drastically changed. Germany, desperate to protect these invaluable historical treasures, made frantic attempts to safeguard them, shielding them with sandbags, hiding them in deep cellars, and relocating them to underground mines. Yet, all these precautions proved futile in the face of the chaos and destruction that engulfed the war's final days. Merciless Allied bombings reduced entire sections of the museums to ruins. What survived the explosions fell victim to marauding. Some items vanished without a trace beneath heaps of rubble, others were stolen by German soldiers themselves, and many were seized by Soviet troops during events that later came to be known as the Second Looting of Berlin. The catalog of losses is horrifying and staggering. Over 300 marble statues, 5 majestic bronze sculptures, 100 ancient vases, 40 reliefs, and 150 engraved gemstones, and this is but a small fraction of what was lost. This is not merely about symbolic losses. It concerns irreplaceable works of art, priceless fragments of human history that either perished in the fire of war or were forever torn from their historical context. Thus, Berlin, once a beacon of archaeological knowledge and a magnet for scholars of antiquity, was transformed into a sorrowful cemetery of treasures, disfigured by war and lost to future generations. A third outstanding achievement is the Cocceius Tunnel, an underground triumph of engineering created under Agrippa's direction. Let us imagine 38 BC. Octavian, Julius Caesar's successor, sought to consolidate his power. His trusted confidant, Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, a talented engineer and military commander, conceived the creation of a strategically important military port on Lake Avernus, near Naples. To connect the lake with the ancient city of Cumae, he decided on an unprecedented step: the construction of a tunnel almost a kilometer long, hewn through the volcanic rock of Mount Grillo. The Cocceius Tunnel, also known as the Crypta Cocceius, became a pinnacle of Roman engineering. It was not only spacious enough for 2 carriages to pass simultaneously, but also richly adorned with niches, statues, and a colonnade. 6 vertical shafts ensured the penetration of light and fresh air into this unique underground structure. Parallel to it, the Aqua Augusta Aqueduct was built along the tunnel's northern side, supplying water to the new military port. The entire project was conceived by Lucius Cocceius Optus, the same architect who designed the first Pantheon in Rome. For centuries, this underground marvel served not only military purposes, but also as an important trade and strategic route. Later, the tunnel acquired the name Grotta del Pesce in honor of a Spanish captain who, in the 15th century, used it to plunder ancient ruins. However, the Second World War dealt a devastating blow to the tunnel. Although it had withstood the test of centuries, modern warfare proved merciless. Explosions caused the structure to collapse and destroyed part of its architectural heritage. The tunnel was closed to visitors and consigned to oblivion for many years. When restoration work finally began, an unexpected obstacle arose. 5 species of bats, protected under Italian law, had made the tunnel their home. Works were suspended, and the Cocceius Tunnel, this lost gem of the Roman Republic, lies frozen underground, guarded by shadows and the echoes of Agrippa's genius. The 4th treasure comprises the ships of Nemi, once Caligula's magnificent floating palaces, now reduced to ashes. In the tranquil waters of Lake Nemi, located just 30 kilometers from Rome, Emperor Caligula brought to life a daring concept, commissioning 2 colossal vessels that defied common sense. A pertinent question arises: why were ships over 70 meters long needed on a small volcanic lake, whose area was less than 2 square kilometers? The answer to this question remains an unsolved mystery. However, It is known that these vessels were true floating palaces, astonishing in their splendor. One of the ships was richly adorned with marble, exquisite mosaics, majestic columns, and roofs of gilded copper that gleamed in the sun. On board, there was running water, heating, and decorative floors, creating an atmosphere of luxury and comfort, like an imperial villa gracefully gliding across sacred waters. The other, smaller ship had no visible means of propulsion, suggesting it was towed. These vessels, lost to oblivion for centuries, were only rediscovered in the 15th century. However, it was not until 1932, by personal order of Benito Mussolini, that the complex operation to raise them from the lake bed was successfully carried out. The lake was completely drained through an ancient Roman tunnel, and the gigantic ships, like relics of a long-past golden age, emerged in all their glory. A museum of Nemi was specially built to house them, where they rested undisturbed, save from the watery element, until merciless war found them. On May 31, 1944, during an American air attack on a nearby German position, Nazi soldiers guarding the museum were forced to retreat. Soon after, local residents observed thick smoke billowing from the museum building. The circumstances leading to that night's tragedy are still fiercely debated. Some blame German soldiers, accusing them of deliberately setting fire to the museum before fleeing, while others believe Allied bombings caused the blaze. Whatever the truth, the fact remains: the ships were completely destroyed by fire, reduced to a pile of ashes. All that remained of these priceless maritime treasures were charred beams, scattered pieces of marble, and bronze. Over 1,000 years of history were irrevocably erased in one tragic night. In 2020, the mayor of Nemi, Alberto Bertucci, appealed to the German government for compensation, asserting that the destruction of the ships was a deliberate act of vandalism, not an accidental consequence of hostilities. The damage inflicted was irreparable, and what was once Caligula's eccentric luxury now lives only in faded photographs, dry archaeological reports, and charred fragments of memory. In the world of antiques, discoveries sometimes occur that are comparable to finding buried treasure. One such marvel happened in August 2018, when Laura Young, a discerning antique dealer from Texas, visited a Goodwill store in Austin. Among the dusty shelves and tables laden with all sorts of clutter, her gaze was drawn to a marble bust. Heavy, weighing about 23 kilograms, it stood out from the crowd with its refinement and realistic facial depiction. The price was more than modest, just $34.99. Unaware of the value of her find, Laura purchased what later turned out to be a genuine Roman sculpture, presumably created in the 1st century AD and linked to the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Experts suggest the bust might depict Sextus Pompeius, son of the celebrated General Pompey the Great, or Drusus Germanicus, Emperor Tiberius's younger brother. Further investigation revealed the astonishing history of this 1,000-year-old artifact. It was discovered to have been part of the collection of the Pompejanum Villa, erected in the 19th century on the Main River in Germany, by order of King Ludwig I of Bavaria. During the Second World War, the villa was destroyed by bombing and looted, and many valuable items, including this bust, disappeared without a trace. How the sculpture ended up in the United States remains a mystery. It is presumed that an American soldier might have taken it as a trophy or acquired it from someone who did. Subsequently, the bust was anonymously donated to a Goodwill store, where Laura Young discovered it. The organization's archives held no information about the donor. Realizing the true value of her find, Laura contacted specialists from the San Antonio Museum, who confirmed the bust's authenticity. However, her lawyer warned that selling the artifact was impossible, as it was stolen cultural property, and international laws prohibit profiting from illegally obtained heritage. Complex negotiations with Germany for the bust's return began. The German side agreed to accept it back, but on the condition that it would first be exhibited in a Texas museum as a tribute to Laura Young's role in discovering this treasure. Thus, an ordinary trip to a second-hand shop turned into the unraveling of an astonishing story, connecting Rome's imperial past, the tragedy of the Second World War, and the coincidences of modern life. The bust, having survived emperors, wars, and looting, reappeared with a price tag not exceeding $35, becoming a symbol that true treasures can sometimes be found in the most unexpected places. Pompeii, between Vesuvius's ash and the echoes of World War II. Pompeii, an ancient city frozen in time under Vesuvius's ash in 79 AD, is one of the world's most significant archaeological sites. However, few know that this place holds not only evidence of an ancient tragedy, but also a hidden danger in the form of unexploded bombs dropped during the Second World War. In 1943, Allied intelligence mistakenly reported the presence of a German military base within the archaeological complex. As a result, Allied aircraft conducted 9 massive raids, dropping 165 bombs on Pompeii. As it turned out, the information was inaccurate. In reality, there were only 2 anti-aircraft guns and a few trucks. Nevertheless, damage was inflicted. A significant portion of the bombs detonated, but about 10% remained unexploded, buried under a thick layer of volcanic ash and earth. Decades later, archaeologists began to discover these deadly artifacts of war. Anthony de Simone, an archaeologist working in Pompeii in 1986, recalls an instance when, during routine excavations, an unexploded bomb was found just a few centimeters from his workspace. One had already exploded, but the other was completely intact, he recounts. According to 2019 estimates, between 7 and 10 unexploded bombs may still lie within the 22 hectares of the site yet to be excavated. The discovery and neutralization of these explosive devices is a slow, laborious, and costly process. Military engineers advance meter by meter, using magnetometers, which often conflicts with traditional archaeological methods due to their invasive nature. Despite the existing risk, authorities assure that tourists and workers are safe. Every area designated for excavation is thoroughly inspected and cleared by specialized teams beforehand. Nevertheless, the realization that Pompeii's history is not only a tragedy caused by a volcanic eruption, but also a legacy of war cannot but cause concern. Italy as a whole is littered with unexploded bombs from the Second World War. By some estimates, only about 60% of the explosive devices dropped on the country have been discovered so far. Thus, Pompeii, steeped in silence and buried under ash, holds not only the memory of an ancient catastrophe, but also the hidden echoes of the 20th century's most destructive war. Eternal treasures, forged in the fire of trials, and etched into the depths of the human soul. Often, we are inclined to seek history on the pages of books, yet its true embodiment lies in the marks that time, bloody wars, and inexorable oblivion leave on the surface of stone, in the intricacies of marble, and in the collective memory of generations. The 5 precious artifacts of ancient Rome discussed here were not merely outstanding examples of art or engineering. They served as silent witnesses to the grandeur of a civilization whose influence forever changed the course of world history. And although many of these monuments fell victim to destructive flames, ruthless bombings, or greedy avarice, their legacy continues to live on through our shared memory and desire to preserve a connection with the past. In the modern world, now more than ever, an awareness of the scale of what has been lost allows us to look anew at the value of what still remains in our possession. For a people who lose touch with their historical past are inevitably doomed to repeat tragic mistakes.